course, Woody Robertson here, who's giving us a presentation about study skills and all these things. So I'm glad all you guys could be here. And hi, Mike, Kelly, and Donnie. Glad you're finally able to make it.
Thanks. Sorry I'm late.
Well, no, it's fine. I think we were all kind of late. So.
And I'll probably have to hop off in like just a little bit. I'm not available for very long.
That's fine.
All right,
That's
we'll
fine.
pack it in for you.
That's great. So, Woody, I guess I'm just handing it over to you now.
Okay. Well, I know that time is short, and we're just getting into this late. I was just telling my story about what led up to College Plus and the starting of it 11 years ago. And the background is that I was a horrible student in high school. I hated reading. I would get books handed to me by my mother when she'd come home from a conference, and she'd say, "Woody, leaders are readers," and she'd hand me the stack. And it was kind of frustrating for me because I'd never get through them. I just would become bored or distracted. I thought of myself as a really bad student, and I was frustrated. But what I came to realize are some techniques and tricks that have helped College Plus students by the thousand now. That literally changed my life. And if you looked at my office bookshelf, which I'm at my home right now, but if you were at my office, you'd see an entire bookshelf full of about I don't know, 400 or 500 books. And to go from not having read maybe more than 3 or 4 or 5, 10 real books in my life up until the time I was 25 years old to now reading, hundreds of books is a pretty big, exciting thing for me. And so I wanted to tell you just a few of the tips that are really not that difficult that created breakthroughs in my life. I've got a PowerPoint. I'm going to shift over to that and tell me if you can see this. It should be coming up. Should be coming up right now. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Got a big College Plus emblem in the middle?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the notes on the side, or are you just seeing the main screen?
Just the mains.
Good. Okay. Well, study like a genius. This is a session we do at conferences around the country and typically packs out. Like, people really get excited about this session. So we're going to talk about two things, speed reading and memory skills. And I'm going to just blast through for a bit, and then we'll take a minute and answer questions and thoughts and whatever else. Here's some background. 45% of students show no significant improvement in the key measures of critical thinking, complex reasoning, and writing after 2 years of college. Basically, for most students, information comes in one ear and out the other. And I'll tell you there's a couple reasons for that, one of which is that to study today is way harder than it would have been to study 250 years ago. If you were a founding father and you were studying back then, the biggest distraction you would have had was maybe a horse and buggy driving down the street. But today, we're bombarded with information. In fact, the scientists tell us that the average person takes on 5,000 marketing messages a day and kind of filters those all out. And your brain begins to filter things out. I became aware of this when I was introducing my grandma recently to a computer. And we sat down and we were showing her how to use the keyboard and mouse and how to click on the internet. And we took her to some website, I think it was a news source, and she just says, she says, "Where do I look? There's information everywhere. How do I know what to look at?" And I had to laugh because we have become so used to filtering information out and having it not be distracting. We can just focus in on what we're going to learn. Every day you pick up you start your morning out with a toothpaste tube. It says Colgate, or it says Crest, or it says whatever brand is on there. But over time, your brain just filters all that out. It doesn't even pay attention to it. And again, about 5,000 marketing messages a day. So if you take the brain, right underneath your skull, this bumpy, fuzzy part is called the cerebral cortex. And within the cerebral cortex, there's over 100 million neurons. And neurons are where all information is stored. And you see that different sections of the brain here cover different behaviors or skilled motor movements. You can see that the front of the brain covers your sensory, your smell, extrovert behavior and emotion. The top part of the brain, called the parietal lobe, covers your skilled motor movements, basic eye-hand coordination, that kind of stuff. The back of the brain is occipital lobe, vision, balance. The temporal lobe is balance and muscle, smell, hearing. So these different parts of the brain process different functions. This is why you may know of somebody that's had a mental trauma of some kind, a brain trauma, and maybe a certain part of the brain's been damaged. But they can talk just normally, or they can play the piano just normally, but yet they'll totally forget where they live, they'll forget how to say their name. You know, various weird things will happen is because that part of the brain that stored that information is damaged. So we're going to talk about these neurons for just a minute, and stick with me because this is kind of the foundation for why everything I'm about to teach you is going to make sense. The neurons are these big kind of blobs that you see, and off the neurons are these things called dendrite branches. Dendrite branches, wherever they touch each other, they form what we call, scientists call the synaptic connections. Synaptic connections are where the brain actually fires and processes learning or processes knowledge. I could say it this way: if you have ever gone to introduce a friend to another very good friend and you completely space out on that friend's name and you're standing there and it's really embarrassing. I don't know if that's ever happened to you guys or not, but I'm sure it has. And you know, you scratch your head and your friend says, well, you've known me for all your life. How could you forget my name? And it's true that, you know, the name is there. It's not that it's not in the brain. It's that you're struggling to bring it back out when you need it. And so frequently, if I'm stuck there trying to remember somebody's name in one of those awkward situations, I'll think about their last name, or I'll think about who they're married to. And if I can come at the information from another direction, from another dendrite branch, I'll be able to come at and have multiple ways to get at the information, which causes more of these synaptic connections. So basically, the more roots you have, the more these little fibers that go throughout your brain, which is all in this thing called the cerebral cortex, the smarter you are and the more you're able to learn. So what I want to teach you tonight is a couple simple techniques that will help you build more of these dendrite branches so that you actually take in knowledge faster. So we're going to start with speed reading. Now, why don't you read this to yourself? Go ahead, you can read it out loud, in fact, so read it with me. According to research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in the word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be at the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. Now, you probably were able to read that without a problem. You were probably reading that along with me, and if you were doing so, that tells me that you are now what we call a sight reader. So when people first learn to read, when they're, say, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10, or whatever, they are phonetic readers. They sound out every syllable, every vowel, every consonant. But when you get to be a sight reader, like you are, your brain just sees the number of letters and the first and last letter, and it basically computes what that word is without your brain having to read and sound out every syllable. This is why we can read so quickly today versus children. It takes them a long time to kind of sound out the syllables and pronounce every consonant and vowel and that kind of thing. So anyway, this slide is to show you, hey, your brain's capable of doing more than you may think. And this is kind of a crazy slide to pop up here. So let's take it from this perspective. The brain's capable of taking in more information. In fact, scientists say that 9,000 words per minute is how fast the average person takes in learning. So looking around a room, scanning and just seeing what you're looking at there in your bedroom or your house, your brain's taking in information about 9,000 words per minute. Yet the average college student or adult reads at 300 words per minute, so just a fraction of what you're used to processing information. And this is one of the reasons why I became so distracted when I was reading and frustrated, and I couldn't stay focused, and I'd have words randomly jumping off the page. I'd read 3 or 4 pages and stop and realize I didn't remember anything from what I just read. I'd completely zoned out, and I'd go back and try to read it again, and I'd be frustrated, and I'd be like, this is so frustrating. Why can't I get this? It was because I was reading so slow. So let me just take a quick pause here and see if this makes sense to you guys. Do any of you, do you recognize that? Do you see it? Does it happen to you? Well, I'm seeing some nodding of heads. If you're nodding your head, this is because you're reading too slow. And what I'm about to teach you is going to help you quadruple your reading speed, read 4 times as fast, and when you read 4 times as fast, your brain actually says, yes, that's worth paying attention to. Now's the time to focus. So I'm going to jet back over to the PowerPoint slide here. Okay. So there's 4 things we'll talk about just real quickly, and I'm not going to take a lot of time, so don't worry. First thing is find a environment free of distraction when you study. Now this was me when I first was doing my homeschool high school studies and also my College Plus studies. I thought, man, there's a reason I'm doing college outside of the classroom, so I could get all comfortable and just spread out and maybe even take a nap. I mean, this is perfect. But what happens is when you sit and slouch and get comfortable like this, your brain says, you know what, he's just goofing off. He's just doing this for pleasure. He's not actually wanting to learn. And so when you go to study, find a place that's free of distraction that you can really like sit at a desk, both feet on the floor, and focus. I laugh at the people that say they have to go to Starbucks to study. And one of the reasons people go to Starbucks to study or a coffee shop or whatever is that they're reading so slow, they're learning so slow that they're bored, and they have to have something around them that's activity, you know, grinders, a coffee maker, and everything else going off, just to kind of keep them engaged. So they'll go to a busy, noisy place, which really is the worst place to study, just because they're reading and taking information so slow. Okay, so this is a triple speed drill, and this, if you get nothing else out of this presentation, this is a drill that literally changed my life. This is from a guy named Howard Berg, who's the world's fastest speed reader. He reads at 50,000 words per minute. Now that is crazy fast. 50,000 words per minute. So here's what you do. For 1 minute, you time yourself with, say, a phone or something else. Time yourself for 1 minute reading at your normal reading speed through a book. Now, by the way, this is a book that you've already read before, a book that's on your bookshelf. This is a drill. And, you know, like piano students that do drills, the drill is not meant to sound pretty or to sound nice. You know, if you got a sibling that's playing the piano and doing piano drills, it sounds horrible. This is a drill to learn how to read faster. This is not actually to read itself. This is a drill to help you practice. So what you're going to do is grab a book that you've already read before, a book that's familiar to you, maybe one of your studies in American history or something like that. But anyway, a book that you've already read before. For 1 minute, start at the beginning of the book and read as fast, you know, read your normal reading speed through that book. The second minute, go back to the start of the book, back to where you began, and read twice as fast. In the third minute, go back again to the start of the book, read 3 times as fast. Now you're saying, how can you just read double as fast or twice as fast? This is a drill. This is not that you're going to actually see and read every word as you're moving along twice or 3 times as fast. It means you're going to be skipping over some words. But what you're doing in this drill is you're training your mind to take in information faster, because it's certainly capable of doing that. The 4th minute, you read at your normal reading speed. So you do this drill 4 times in a row. Every time you're coming back to the beginning, first section of the book, and you're starting over. So 1 minute, 2nd minute, 3rd minute, 4th minute. Every time you go back to the start. Do it 4 times in a row, and you do it twice a day, once in the morning and once at night. If you do this consistently 5 days a week for 3 weeks, you will more than quadruple your reading speed. I went from 250 words per minute, which is below average. Remember, average is 300. I went to 1,200 words per minute in just 3 weeks doing this drill, 5 days a week. And it requires consistency. If you start into it and you're not consistent, you're going to think I'm the worst guy ever. So make sure that you're consistent and do the drill, you know, every day, 5 days a week, 3 weeks, and you will think I'm the most awesome person in the world. So let me just take a minute for questions. Does this make sense? Any questions for you? No?
Yeah, I think this makes sense. I've definitely tried this drill a few times, and I think it's gotten me to speed read faster, but I couldn't get myself to keep doing it because it's like my brain hurt if I, like, when it says read 3 times at your comprehension, I'm like, is that really reading when you're reading 3 times faster than your comprehension? So I guess, can you speak to that question?
Yeah, and that's where you have to keep in mind this is a drill. This is not actually reading. This is a drill. This is a book you've already read before. You're not trying to learn from this book. It's something that you're using as a drill. So if you keep that mindset, you'll be able to get through it. I've got some other things that might make that a little easier, so let me keep going. Okay, so next up, let's see here. Hello. All right, there we go. Use your hand when you read. Now, there's two reasons for a hand motion. So this would mean you set your hand on the page, set it flat. Two reasons for a hand motion. When you use a hand, it sets a consistent speed for your eyes. Your eyes, scientifically proven, actually I can just tell you this way. If you sit across the table from somebody as they're reading and you watch their pupils, they're actually bouncing around. They're not moving evenly across the page like you might think that they are. Scientists tell us that the eyes have a tendency to slow down on the things it recognizes, like words that it knows, and speed up over words it doesn't recognize. So it says, hey, if I never knew this word before, I certainly don't need to know it now. Let's just move on. So that's the opposite of what you want to happen. And by using a hand motion, which is literally where you take your palm and you kind of set it up on the page, you're able to keep your eyes moving evenly across the page and keep a consistent speed. So, Josh, back to your question earlier, how do you kind of know when you're doubling or tripling your speed? One way you can know that is the amount of information that you go through. Like if you go through in 1 minute, you cover one paragraph, and in 2 minutes, you go through 5 paragraphs. It's just easier to see what you're actually covering that way. The second reason for a hand motion is you can block information out that's distracting. I'm sorry, I'm having a little computer problem here. I hope you can see my screen. But you block information out that's distracting because most people read so slow, their eyes have a tendency to jump around the page looking for anything of interest. And so that's not what you want to have happen. You want your eyes to be focused in on the information you're going to learn. So when you put your hand up on the page, it kind of blocks the information out and keeps you from being distracted with it. So does that make sense? The two reasons for a hand motion?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're doing the triple speed drill that we just taught, and you double and triple your speed, you're doubling and tripling your speed basically by covering twice as much information as you did in the first read. When you come back for the second read, you're going to go down, say, 2 paragraphs instead of just 1. The third read, you're going to go 3 paragraphs instead of just 1. So that's kind of a general barometer. But the other way is you're kind of moving your hand twice or 3 times as fast. And you don't need a radar gun. It's not that scientific. But you're just trying to... This whole drill is about practicing taking in information faster. Okay, so the Smart Reader Reader book will end with this. If you want to learn from a book, like any College Plus studies that you do, you're going into it with the emphasis on learning. So this is the way you'd want to attack a book. I do the same thing for any kind of self-help book, any kind of business book, any book that somebody hands me and they say, hey, you should read this book. If it's not a pleasure book, like a novel or something like that, this is the technique I use. So the first thing I do is skim the table of contents, entire text, and glossary. Now, you might say, well, why do you do this? What is skimming? So skimming is about a page per second. Page, look it over, kind of take your hand down the page, just 1 second, flip to the next page, 1 second, 1 second, flip to the next page, 1 second, 1 second. And what you're doing, say you got a 300-page book, it's going to take you about 300 seconds to do that, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. You're giving your brain a big picture perspective on what's covered within that book. You're teaching your brain to kind of get engaged so it says, okay, this is what I'm going to expect to read when I actually sit down to read this book. And you're activating something the scientists call your reticular activating system. I'll get it out right. Reticular activating system works like this. If you ever buy a new car or a new purse or a new pair of shoes or something like this, and all of a sudden you see all the other people with the same exact purse or shoes that you never noticed before, it's that your brain's so used to filtering information out it really doesn't pay attention to it. But when it's looking for it, it says, there's one, oh, there's another one. Wow, I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but that's called your reticular activating system. And so that's what we want to engage when you go to learn from a book. You want to be saying, there's the information I was looking for. Yeah, that's the thing I didn't know. Oh, there's that new word I was looking to. That's what you want to do is get your brain engaged. So 1 page per second, the first thing you do, point number 1, skim the entire book cover to cover. The next thing you do is you open up the first chapter in the book that you're ready to actually read. And before you read it, you skim that chapter and summary questions. Now, most books, like textbooks and those kind of things, they have these summary questions at the end, and they basically say, what's the answer to this, or here's the answer to that, and go ahead and read all that. And you might say, well, isn't that cheating? No, actually, it's kind of tricking your brain into saying, oh yeah, by the time you're done with this chapter, you need to know this, so pay attention and look for it. And you may actually get to the place where you say, I already know that stuff. Like, why do I even need to read this chapter? I know every one of these points. And if so, you might consider just skipping the chapter. But anyway, the third thing that you do is, for third step, is you actually read the chapter, the first chapter, at your normal reading speed. Now, after doing that drill for 3 weeks, hopefully that significantly improved your speed. Maybe you're up to 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 words per minute. Great. Whatever speed that is, read at your normal reading speed. And then the fourth thing, actually on the third read, rather than getting stuck on points that are confusing or that don't make sense or something that just you want to memorize, maybe you want to take notes on, rather than slowing down your speed, just keep going on the third read, but take a little pencil and make a mark in the margin that says, hey, when you come back on the fourth read, just look for those pencil marks. And so that's what you do, is on the fourth read, you're looking for anything that didn't make sense to you or anything that you want to come back and try to memorize or copy into your notes, and you're doing that based on the pencil marks you made on the third read. But the third read, your goal is to just keep your speed going. Now, when you go at it from the fourth read, one of the things you'll notice, where I notice, is I come across things that I marked that I didn't understand or didn't make sense, and rather than stopping, I just kind of kept going. But by reading the rest of the chapter, normally it makes total sense. Normally I'm like, oh yeah, that completely makes sense. I get it. Why did I even mark that? I don't know. But you get it now through the contextual clues because you've read the rest of the chapter. Okay, and the final thing you do after reading chapter 1 is you go back over and skim, one last skim, page per second, through what you just read. It is fascinating to me how that one last skim will help lock information in. It'll help make it so that I get it, it makes sense, and it kind of puts it in a long-term memory. So there you go. Those are the 5 steps to reading a book if you want to learn from it. We're getting ready to transition into some memory stuff. Any questions about reading so far? Don't all jump at once. You overwhelm me. All right. I'm getting some no, you got it. All right. Good. Well, let's just keep going then. On time, I think I'm doing okay. All right. Okay. So let's just take a quick break and talk about big picture things that help you study smarter. Number 1 is sleep. The scientists say that the normal person needs 8 hours of sleep to be functioning at their proper, full brain function. And a lot of people today, they like to joke around or kid about how little sleep they get. And it's not actually a badge of honor. It's kind of stupidity, these people that only sleep 3 or 4 hours and then they're up and studying. That's just not helpful. You're not going to get your actual studies in. You're not going to be studying at your peak performance. So I would rather sleep full 8 hours, even if I have less time to study. My time of study is going to be more productive and better. Second thing, when I was working on my bachelor's degree at 25, I was working in a full-time job. I was trying to support myself, and I had full College Plus load of studies, and I ended up earning my degree in 18 months. I had to get up at 5 o'clock every morning to try to study, and I got up, first thing I did, rolled out of bed, kind of went to try to study, and I found myself kind of daydreaming, frustrated, like I couldn't study, I was asleep. I, kind of put the book, I like laid my head on the book at times when I was just exhausted. I just couldn't keep my eyes open. What I found is that getting outside and exercising for 20 to 30 minutes a day, first thing in your day, it pumps the blood to your brain and gets the oxygen going. And your brain is like a giant muscle. It needs oxygen to be able to function. And so by exercising every day, at the very beginning part of my day, I am much more alert and alive, and my brain's activated, and my studies go a lot better. So sleep, exercise. The final thing is proper nutrition. Most people don't drink enough water. The scientists tell us that we need 8 to 12 8-ounce glasses of water every day. And if you're looking for brain food, nuts high in protein, particularly almonds, are good. And I've also heard that blueberries are very good for brain functioning. Okay, so let me also say this. When you sleep, your brain actually defrags your brain. I don't know how many of you go to bed frustrated at night, you're completely overwhelmed. Maybe life is just horrible, you think. And you go to bed and you sleep on it and you wake up the next day and you're like, it's a new day. The sun is shining. It's wonderful. I can't wait to hit this day. Well, one of the things that's taken place is you gotten your rest, but secondly, your brain's had a chance to kind of defrag itself. And so it sort of sorts everything out in its mind, sort of compartmentalizes things. It processes. In fact, I've got a friend that he's a mathematician. Every time he gets stuck on a math problem, he always goes and takes a nap. And it's fascinating to me because he'll go and take a nap, he'll be out for 20, 30 minutes, and he'll come back with the answer to this very difficult problem. And it's happening because in his subconscious, he's processing information. So again, sleep is good, exercise is good, and proper nutrition. This, unfortunately, is not good. So those of you that are into caffeine for your artificial stimulation, it doesn't actually help you. It's actually a brain deadener, and so it's not going to help you study smarter. It might get you awake, and it gets you awake because it's pumping toxins in your brain. Caffeine is a toxin, and your brain kind of wakes up because it's got to get this stuff out. You may wish there's a caffeine inhaler, not so much. All right. That was free and bonus. Let's move into memory skills. So we're reading faster with the speed reading stuff we talked about. Let's talk about how do you put things into long-term memory. We're going to talk about two things, peg lists, associations, and mind maps. So for 3 things to remember almost anything, we call this FPG, file, picture, and glue. File is the brain works best when it can file and compartmentalize all information. We can kind of put it into order and have a place for the information. Picture is when it can actually visualize something that I can see, and it can kind of mentally say, yeah, I see that in my brain. And the glue is, we call this VIA, vivid visualization, imagination, and active action. The glue is basically what holds the information together. And let me explain how what I just taught you here is going to actually make sense. If you would say this with me, read through this list. We're going to do it a couple times. So here we go. 1 bun, 2 shoe, 3 tree, 4 door, 5 hive, 6 sticks, 7 heaven, 8 gate, 9 vine, 10 hen. Why don't you do it again? 1 bun, 2 shoe, 3 tree, 4 door, 5 hive, 6 sticks, 7 heaven, 8 gate, 9 vine, 10 hen. Now, do it again. Oops. Do it one more time with me. Here we go. 1 bun, 2 shoe, 3 tree, 4 door, 5 hive, 6 sticks, 7 heaven, 8 gate, 9 vine, 10 hen. Now, you probably could say that from memory, even when I blacked out the screen. And you could probably do that because most of you know your numbers. You can count to 10. You're homeschooled. You're smart homeschool students. And secondly, these numbers and these words all rhyme. 1 bun, 2 shoe, 3 tree, they all kind of rhyme, so therefore you probably got both words in harmony. Okay, so the FPG we just talked about a minute ago. F is the file system. By the way, that's numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's your file system. The P is the picture, and that's the bun, 2, shoe, tree, door, 5 hive, sticks, the heaven, gate, vine, 10. Those are all mental pictures that you can see. And the G is the glue that's going to hold this random list that you see on the screen. We call this a number rhyming list to something that's important. Now, let's say you're driving down the road and your mom calls you or your spouse calls you and they say, hey, Woody, could you pick up these 5 things or 10 things at the grocery store, and they start rattling through the list. This is a system that you can peg those things on the fly. So let's do this. Could you chat me 10 random things that you might pick up at a grocery store and just chat them in? You can... let's see if we can do this right. Let's see here. I think you might be able to... All right, you still seeing the screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So what's one thing you would pick up at a grocery store, like the first thing?
Eggs.
Eggs, perfect. Okay, so 1 bun is going to be eggs. And the way we're going to remember this is we're going to do that FPG. By the way, is the screen flickering for you, or is it just me?
Yeah, it's flickering.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's flickering, but it's not that bothersome.
Well, it's driving me crazy. Let me see that. Okay, there we go. Hopefully that's better. Okay. Is that better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing is eggs. So what you do is you FPG. You got the file system. We got the picture, the bun. Now we need the G, the vivid visualization, imagination, active action. So picture in your mind. You got to mentally see this a bun, and picture eggs on that bun. Now to make it a little bigger than life, to add some imagination to it, imagine raw eggs. So picture yourself in a Subway store, and somebody says, the Subway lady, she says, "So what would you like on your sandwich, sir?" "Well, I'd like some eggs." And she, "All right." She cracks the raw eggs on your bun. Okay, if you can mentally visualize that in your brain, you'll remember this for the rest of your life. So, not that you want to remember this random Google Hangout call that we've got here tonight, but you're going to, I guarantee it. All right, what's the next item you might pick up at a store?
Milk. Yeah. Yeah. Hey.
So guess what your shoe is entirely full of? It's full of milk. And to add some imagination to it, think about taking off your shoes and socks in your brain and sliding them into your shoe and have the milk slosh out. And to make it even a little more crazy, imagine the milk is not refrigerated, so it's gone stale, and so it's got a smell, an odor. This is the best way to take care of foot odor, is actually sour milk. Anyway, if you imagine that, you'll remember that milk and shoes go together. How about the third item? We'll start doing these a little faster.
Apples.
Apples, great. Well, that's a super easy one. So the tree grows apples, but to remember that apples and tree go together, in order to remember information, you have to make it a little bit interesting. You have to make it a little bit dynamic so that your brain kind of scratches its head and says, "Hey, that's kind of interesting. That's fun. That's worth remembering." Now, apples and trees are not that crazy to remember. So in order for me to remember this, I would picture that the apples are alive on the tree and that they're jumping around and that they're, I don't know, that they're dropping off the tree and they'll hit you and they'll throw themselves off the tree as you walk by. That's what I would have to do to add that imagination to it. All right, next item. Don't be so bashful, guys.
A flower.
Great. So your four-door, typically you think of a car probably, four-door car, is completely full of flour. Imagine getting in there with the flour. Like it's going to be flying everywhere. It's going to be going all over the place. You're going to be frustrated. You'll come out, you go to your meeting or your CLEP test, and you'll be covered in flour. Fifth thing is it can't be honey. What about, say, something like, I don't know, beets or something like that?
Oh, man.
I know. They're ugly and horrible. So let's say that your beehive grows beets, and that it's so bad that your bees, they go to stick their beaks or whatever you call them into their little spots where they would normally collect the nectar or the honey, and instead they get beets. And the same responses we have to beets, like, "Ugh, yuck, this is horrible." You know, if you can picture that in your brain and the bees jumping around and being like, "Oh, this is horrible," then you'll remember that. Let's keep going. What are some other things?
How about butter?
All right, 6 sticks of butter. This is a little bit harder because sticks, butter, you know, you buy butter in sticks already. It's not that imaginative. So maybe imagine that the butter is all melted and that the wrapping container, you know, the little, what do you call those, wax paper that basically goes around the butter. Like that's the only thing left of the stick and everything else is just kind of smushed out. That's what I would do. How about the next item?
Bananas.
Great. Well, imagine all the angels in heaven, that's all they eat is bananas. And they sit in bananas, they eat bananas, the streets of gold are paved in bananas, banana peels. You'll remember that. Okay, so next item.
Let's see.
Cauliflower.
All right. So your gate is entirely made of cauliflower. The handle is cauliflower. Imagine reaching out your hand to open the gate. the handle, and you're going to feel cauliflower, and it's going to be bushy and whatever else. Imagine that it sits out in the sun for days on end. There's bugs growing in it. It's turned rancid, smells. You know, you might add some imagination that way. Next item.
Carrots.
Okay, so instead of a vineyard growing grapes, it's going to grow carrots. And imagine grape clusters. You know, like there's a million grapes on a cluster. They're all carrots. And maybe there's like thousands of rabbits in this vineyard because there's so many carrots. I don't know. I picture something like that. Next item can't be. Oh, we already did eggs. So. What's the last one?
How about pomegranate?
All right, you're gonna hate me for this. The hen
No, I know
lays
it's going.
pomegranates.
The hen what? What does the hen do?
It's laying eggs, but it's not a pretty sight, and particularly not laying pomegranates.
Oh dear.
Okay. Now, if you visualized those 10 random things in your mind, again, that's the key, is visualization. File, picture, glue. If you visualize this, and you use that FPG, which we've already got the number system, that's got our file, so you've already got that covered. You got the picture that you've seen in your head, and the glue is what holds it all together. If you did FPG here, you're going to remember these 10 things for the rest of your life. And let's just try it. So here we go. I'm going to say the one bun. You tell me what it was. So here we go. One bun.
Eggs.
Two shoe.
Milk.
Three tree.
Apples.
Apples.
Four door.
Flour.
Flour. Yeah.
Five.
Oh, that was beets.
Six sticks.
Butter.
Seven heaven.
Bananas.
Eight gate.
Cauliflower.
Flour.
Nine vine.
Oh,
Carrots.
10 hen.
pomegranate.
You got it. Nicely done, you guys. Okay, so that is a number rhyming list. This gives you up to 10 things to peg. Now, I know that you're all students, and you may be thinking, well, how do I use this for my study? So I'll show you in just a minute. The same technique here will work. If you need to get up to 20 things, that list that I just taught you was the 10 list, number rhyming list. This list will give you 20 items. And what you do is you take 4 rooms in your house, you list them in clock order, and you list 5 items within each room listed in clock order. So just basically this works like this. This is logical information. This is like you can navigate your house with all the lights off in the middle of the night, and unless somebody puts a vacuum sweeper out in the middle of the hallway, you'll be just fine to go out and get yourself a glass of water, a glass of milk, whatever else in the middle of the night. It's because it's all logical. You know where your cabinet is, which shelf the glasses are on. You know your house. And so my house list is going to be different than yours. My rooms are in a different order. The items within each room are in different order. But you can create your own house list, just like this, 5 items within 4 rooms, and have 20 things to peg things to. And in the same way, we just did that FPG for the number rhyming list. You can use a list like this to remember 20 things. And you just do it in the same way. You mentally picture it in your brain. And so, for instance, the first item you called out was eggs. And so you'd imagine that your entire stove or oven is full of eggs. And raw eggs in particular, or maybe you picture solid eggs. You open the door to get your eggs out, and you got to open it gently because they all fall out. The second item we came up with, 2 shoe, was milk. So your cutting block, this is an interesting one. Your cutting block would be doused in milk. It'd be covered over in milk. It'd be dripping off of it in milk. So you kind of do the same thing we just did with the number rhyming list. You do it with a list like this. You tracking with me so far?
Yep.
Okay, let's bring it down to where the rubber meets the road. The last thing I want to teach you is a mind map system. And mind maps are an incredible breakthrough for College Plus students. And this is how you can also use the number rhyming list, and I'll show you how. Mind maps take information that's logical in a linear format. Most people take notes in a linear format, Roman numeral 1, 2, 3 subpoints, line sheets of paper. That's how most of us take notes. That's linear. This turns it into a global presentation of information. It turns it into a picture that you can see. And if you take your notes in a format like you see on the screen, like I did for Earth Science, something that you can mentally see in a picture format, you're going to be much more likely to be able to come back and remember that information, be able to come back and retrieve it when you need it, to be able to come back and get to it. So you can see here that on my mind map, we used various pictures, even out on some of these limbs, to depict and help me remember what those limbs were. But basically, for all the chapters in my Earth Science book, I created an arm. And for all the big, most important things that were part of those chapters, I recorded it within the that arm. And so to be able to remember the order of certain lists that are important, for instance, the Earth's atmosphere, that's all in a order. You've got to remember that order. You can do a couple things. You can either use a number rhyming list to attach those words to the one bun, two shoes, three tree business. That works. Or in some cases, you can turn the word into acrostic. That is easier to remember. Take the first letter of each word and make a word out of that, an acrostic. Sometimes that worked for me. And then the last thing I found helpful was to rewrite my mind map multiple times. So I would rewrite it from memory, and it would concrete the information into my brain. And just by doing it several times, I had pretty much memorized the entire thing. So the first thing I would do in a lot of the tests that I would take, say a DSST exam or CLEP test, I would sit down and recreate my notes like this. I'd recreate my mind map. And the testing administrators really freaked out because he thought, how did you get these notes in here with you? And I'd show them how I could recreate it from memory, and they were shocked. And it was this system of mind mapping that helped me do that. So you can see how the mind map is just easier to see than it would have been to have multiple pages of notes with Roman numerals and line sheets of paper and whatever else. This is a more global presentation. It's a picture. You can add some distinction, things to remember, points to remember, things that stand out with a mind map easier than you can on typical Roman numeral sheet paper. The way to do this would be to take an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, turn it sideways, and record the topic that you're going to study in the middle, and then off your arms write the information. Now let me give you a couple of resources to do this on the computer or on an iPad or on your phone even. These are some free resources that I found helpful, and these free resources make it a little easier to make sections bigger or smaller depending on the amount of information you're going to try to remember. And I just really like it because it's a little cleaner than even trying to do it by hand. You can use colors easier. You can even draw little pictures. But the only thing that you lose in this is the, what do we call the, what's that form of memory? It's the, let me see if I can get it here. It is the kinesthetic memory. That's what it is. If you don't remember somebody's phone number, if somebody hands me a phone, I can dial it for you without a problem. And I can dial it because just from the sheer process of dialing it over and over and over, it's become part of my kinesthetic memory. And so by redrawing or rewriting a mind map over and over and over, it will actually lock it into your long-term memory. So that's the only downside to using this free software, but I think there's a lot of positives for it as well. You can save a copy on your computer and come back, print off as many copies as you need later on. We do this these mind maps in College Plus all the time to remember topics that we're writing about, thinking about, brainstorming, things that we need to collaborate on together. We'll use a mind map. It's just a better way to take notes, and it's a lot more fun. So there you go, a combination of some speed reading memory techniques. Hopefully this is helpful. Questions?
Let's see. You were mentioning, like when we were using the list, 1 through 10, that we could reuse it. I was wondering, have you ever gotten your lists confused when you were trying to use the same system?
That's the first question everybody asks me, and I totally understand it, and it would make sense that it would work that way. But actually, in reality, because your FBG is different every time, I've had no problem using the list, like even the number rhyming list 2 or 3 times a day for, say, studies, for work, for grocery list, even come back using the list again for different grocery lists. I've never had a problem. And I always thought that it would be a problem, but it's not. And there's a couple different mnemonic lists. I taught you 2. There's lots more, so if you ever run into a problem, you can always tap into more lists, but I've just never, those are the 2 lists I use, and it served me for my entire bachelor's degree.
That's cool.
Yeah. Would you suggest making house lists bigger than just 20?
You can do whatever you want. I found that 20 is just kind of a good bite-sized piece. It's kind of a good balance. But if you want to go on and do more, you're certainly welcome to. I would at least make sure that your first 20 you've really got down, that you just know. And you'll probably know them without even really thinking, because you can just visualize your house and be like, oh yeah, my first room is this, the first item within the room is that, and it's not as hard as it might look.
Yeah. Nice. Any more questions, guys?
Miriam, we're missing you. I can't quite hear you. Can you say it again?
Here, Miriam, maybe you can type it in the chat. You can type the question in the chat, and that will work.
We're sorry.
You can also turn your camera off, and you'll be able to get more video, more feed going through your sound, because
Sure.
your internet is being split right now.
Look at us techies.
Yeah.
Should all work for Google.
Well, while Miriam gets that figured out, I actually had a question about combining the speed reading and the dynamic memory. Oftentimes when I was trying to apply some of the speed reading things, I wouldn't be able to do the whole memory peg list things as well. And I mean, I guess when you're working on memory, you're not really speed reading that much. But how do you do that? How do you, while you're speed reading, like, use the memory techniques at the same time?
Yeah, so remember those 5 reads to your book. The 4th read is the study and taking notes speed, and that's where you dive into great detail. That's when I was working on my mind map. So the first read was skim the entire book. The second read was skim the first chapter. The third read was actually read that chapter, make little marks in the margin with anything I wanted to come back and memorize. And the 4th read, that's when I really pay attention and zone in. And that's when I'd have my mind map sitting next to me, and I'd be taking my notes, and is on that 4th read. And this all, it sounds very complicated. As you get into a pattern in this, it's very simple, and it just kind of, you get into a routine. It's not like it takes way extra time. It takes way less time. In fact, when I had to go back and at age 25 open up the same apology of biology book that I had used 8 years before to be able to get me my natural science credits, I read through that book, from cover to cover in the space of a week. And honestly, I was not a very good student in my high school, and I hardly knew that information. So I really learned it in the course of a week. I read the book 3 times. You've seen that Apologia book before. It's, a pretty thick book. So this is really powerful stuff, the combination of this 2, speed reading and memory. Creative breakthroughs for me. So I earned my bachelor's degree in business, general management from Thomas Edison. It took me 18 months, and I was working a full-time job while I was doing that. And it was really these study skills that totally were my saving bacon, because, again, I was a horrible student. Miriam, did we get to your question? One thing. Oh, okay. I got it.
That works. Yeah. I mean, I guess we would all like to that. Just thanks for coming out and sharing all this stuff. It's been really helpful. And then thanks for everything you have done and you still do for College Plus. None of us would be able to get degrees without you. So
it is my total delight. I can't tell you how excited I am about each one of you and the lives that you have ahead. You are on a track that's different than any other student in America. You've taken personal ownership of your studies. You've unbundled your education. You've had a lot more customization, personalization to be able to build a plan that's built around your life. I think about where you're going to be compared to where your peers are going to be 5, 10 years from now. There's going to be a significant difference. And that difference is as a result of you being able to accelerate your degree, you being debt-free by the time you graduate. Those are all big things that are going to cause a significant difference. And whether you decide to go on to graduate school or medical school, law school, or whatever, is go start a business, travel the world, use the extra time to go work in a ministry, those opportunities outside of your bachelor's degrees are where you're really going to learn, and you've just got a lot to look forward to. So keep up the great work. I hope we'll get to see some of you at CPD3 coming up here in a few weeks. I'm really looking forward to meeting those of you that are going to be there in person. And I'm going to ask you the 1 bun, 2 shoe, 3 tree thing all the way through, and you better have the 10 items memorized, all right?
Okay.
Yep, we'll do.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to it.
Well, thank you all so much. It's been a delight, and have a great night.
Well, thank you so much, Woody. Just thanks for doing this.
You're welcome. God bless you.
Okay, God bless.
Bye.
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 Well, that was fun. That was very fun. Now the broadcast is over.